My name is Alina and I am 40 years old. My work is a form of seance. I am a forensic audio archivist, a specialist in restoring and clarifying damaged sound recordings. In my soundproof studio, a sanctuary of vintage reel-to-reels and gleaming digital interfaces, I coax truth from the ghosts of magnetic tape. I can pull a whisper from a hurricane, a confession from a hiss of static. I believe that every recording holds an unshakable truth, and my job is to let it speak. My husband, Rowan, is a professional truth teller. He is a celebrated author and public speaker, a guru of authentic leadership. His brand is built on the idea of finding one's core truth and speaking it with clarity. He was, I believe, the human embodiment of my life's work. He gave speeches about integrity. I restored the evidence of it. We were a perfect harmony, a couple whose very existence seemed to be a tribute to the power of authenticity. He was my biggest champion, fascinated by my esoteric work. "You're a sonic archaeologist, Alina," he'd say, watching me painstakingly piece together a fragmented recording. "You're digging up lost voices. It's sacred work." I loved him for seeing the poetry in my science. The beginning of the end came disguised as the project of a lifetime. Rowan came to me one evening, his eyes alight with a holy fire. He carried a dusty, lead-lined box. "I have been given a gift, Alina. A sacred trust," he said, his voice low with reverence. "These are the audio diaries of Arthur Vance, the reclusive industrialist. The man who mentored me from afar." Vance was a legend, a brilliant but intensely private visionary who had vanished from public life decades before his recent death. His wisdom was the stuff of myth. His estate found them, Rowan explained. "They're in terrible condition. Decades of decay. They've asked me, as his spiritual successor, to be the vessel for his wisdom. But first, the voice needs to be resurrected. Only you can do this." I was honored, overwhelmed. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. For 6 months, the Vance tapes became my world. The recordings were a disaster, muffled, water-damaged, warped. It was the most challenging restoration I had ever faced. Day and night, I worked, patiently filtering, isolating frequencies, and stitching together syllables. Slowly, miraculously, a voice began to emerge from the static. It was the voice of an old man, raspy and frail, but filled with a profound, quiet wisdom. I felt a deep, spiritual connection to him, to the ghost I was bringing back to life. But as the voice became clearer, a strange, unsettling familiarity pricked at the edge of my consciousness. A certain cadence in his speech, the way he would pause before a key phrase. It reminded me of someone, but I couldn't place it. I chalked it up to spending too much time with the recordings. Rowan, meanwhile, was writing furiously, using my restored transcripts to write his new book, The Vance Principles. It was poised to be a global phenomenon. The moment the lie unraveled was a quiet Wednesday afternoon. I had finished the final tape. To celebrate, I decided to work on a personal project, restoring some old family recordings. I digitized a box of microcassettes from Rowan's college days, long before I met him. One was labeled, Debate Club Finals. I put on my headphones and listened to a 20-year-old Rowan, his voice sharp and full of youthful arrogance. For fun, I ran his voice through my spectral analysis software, the program that creates a unique, unforgeable, voice print, based on a person's vocal frequencies. A beautiful, complex waveform appeared on my screen. Then, a cold, sickening thought entered my mind. A professional curiosity I couldn't ignore. I pulled up the voice print for the wise, elderly Arthur Vance. I placed the two waveforms side by side on the screen. My world tilted on its axis. My breath caught in my throat. They were identical, not similar, not close. A one-to-one, scientifically perfect match. The unique, immutable signature of the human voice does not lie. The frail, wise old man I had spent 6 months resurrecting from the dead, was my husband. The mentor, the myth, the reclusive genius, it was all a fabrication. A grand, monstrous lie. Rowan had recorded those diaries himself years ago, then deliberately and expertly damaged the tapes, creating a problem that only my unique skills could solve. He hadn't asked me to restore a truth. He had used my sacred work, the very essence of my soul, to authenticate his fraud. I wasn't an archaeologist. I was his forger. The sound in my studio, once a comfort, became a suffocating silence. Every piece of equipment, every tool I had used with such love, now felt like an instrument of my own deception. He had corrupted my sanctuary. He had made me an unwitting accomplice in the greatest lie of his career. The grief was a low-frequency hum that vibrated in my bones. But after the grief came a cold, crystalline fury. He had used my mastery of sound to build his empire. I would use it to tear that empire down to its foundations. An accusation would be his word against mine, and he was the master of words. I needed proof that was as irrefutable as a voice print. I needed to show the world the raw materials of his lie. I became a different kind of archivist. I began digging into Rowan's digital past. He was arrogant, convinced of his own genius and my technological naivete. He was sloppy. On a long-forgotten backup drive in our basement, I found it. A folder labeled, Early Drafts. Inside were the raw, clean, undamaged audio files of him recording the Vance diaries, dated 15 years prior. The sound of a young, healthy Rowan, meticulously practicing a frail, old man voice. I even found the script he had read from. He had not only faked a man, he had written the man's entire life. My plan formed, not as a shout, but as a whisper. Rowan's book was launching in 2 weeks. He was being honored at the World Forum on Authenticity, where he would receive the prestigious Seeker of Truth award. The ceremony would be live-streamed to millions. During his keynote address, he planned to play a dramatic, 3-minute clip of the restored Arthur Vance audio, the climax of his speech, the voice of his ghost. That clip would be my weapon. I couldn't just swap the audio. That was too crude. My revenge had to be as elegant and technical as his deception. I would embed my proof inside his. The technique is called steganography, hiding data within other data. Audio steganography. I would hide the raw recording of his younger, healthier voice inside the muffled, restored recording he planned to play. It would be my sonic watermark, a ghost inside his ghost, waiting for the right frequency to call it out. I needed an ally. The event's head audio engineer was a former intern of mine, a young man named Ben who revered my work. I called him, my voice steady. I told him I had discovered a deep, technical fraud in the Vance recordings and that I needed his help to correct the record, live. I sent him the 2 audio files and the specific, complex instructions. He replied with 2 words, for truth. The night before the ceremony, Rowan was rehearsing his speech in our living room. He was glowing, a man at the absolute peak of his life. It's going to be a beautiful moment, Alina, he said, his eyes shining. When they finally hear his voice, the whole world will feel it. The truth in it. I looked at him, at the perfect, polished mask of sincerity. The recordings were so damaged, I said, my voice dangerously neutral. It must have been hard for you to hear that truth through all the static. It was always there, he said, not missing a beat. I could just feel it. I knew what was there, even before you worked your magic. He was confessing, in his own arrogant way. He was taking credit for the very soul I thought I had uncovered. You should be careful with sound, Rowan, I said softly, turning to leave. Sometimes, it holds echoes you never intended for people to hear. He just smiled, dismissing my comment as the cryptic musing of his artistic wife. He had no idea I had just armed the bomb and set the timer. The grand hall of the forum was filled with a reverent hush. The theme of the night was unwavering authenticity. I was not in the audience. I was in my studio, watching the global livestream, my hand resting on a master audio console linked directly to Ben's station at the event. Rowan took the stage to a hero's welcome. He was a master, his speech a perfect symphony of vulnerability and strength. He spoke of his long search for a mentor, his discovery of the Vance diaries, and the sacred duty he felt to share this lost wisdom. Words can only do so much, he said, his voice thick with emotion as he reached his climax. To truly understand the heart of a great man, you must hear his voice. For the first time ever, please join me in listening to the restored words of the great Arthur Vance. He nodded to the sound booth. Ben hit play. The audio clip started. The frail, raspy voice of the mentor filled the hall. The audience was captivated, hanging on every word. Rowan stood on stage, his eyes closed, a single, perfect tear tracing a path down his cheek. It was a masterpiece of emotional theater. The clip reached its final, most poignant line. The only legacy a man truly leaves behind is the echo of his truth. As the last word, truth, was spoken, I pushed a single fader on my console. It sent a specific, inaudible frequency tone to Ben's board. This tone was the key, activating the hidden layer in the audio file. It did not swap the track, it morphed it. The sound in the hall shifted. The frail, raspy voice of Arthur Vance did not stop. It seamlessly, chillingly, cleared its throat. The static vanished. The age fell away, and the voice that continued was the strong, clear, unmistakable voice of a young Rowan from the raw, pre-damaged recordings. Is the echo of his truth, the young voice repeated, then chuckled. A cold, arrogant laugh. Okay, let's try that take again. I think I can make the old man sound even more pathetic this time. The more fragile he sounds, the more authentic they'll think he is. A collective, Horrified gasps swept through the auditorium. On the massive screen behind Rowan, which was supposed to show a tasteful photo of the fictional Vance, Ben projected our evidence. The two voice prints, side by side, under the giant, blinking words, 100% sonic match. Source: Rowan Evans, 2005. Rowan's eyes snapped open. He heard his own young, cynical voice echoing through the hall, confessing his methods. He saw the scientific proof of his fraud displayed for the world. The color drained from his face. The guru of authenticity had been unmasked by the one thing he could not fake. He was a man devoured by his own echo. I cut the feed. I didn't need to see the fallout. My revenge was not in his ruin, but in the restoration of the truth. The aftermath was immediate and total. The award was rescinded on stage. His publisher dropped him. His career, built on a single, sonic lie, was over. I filed for divorce. I didn't ask for a single penny. I only asked that he publicly admit that the restoration work I had done was based on fraudulent materials. He had no choice but to agree. My name, my integrity, was cleared. My final act was not one of vengeance, but of purpose. A week later, a museum contacted me. They had found a single, badly damaged wax cylinder recording of a folk singer, a woman whose voice was believed to be lost to history forever. They asked if I could help. I sat down at my console, the clean, honest static of a real piece of history filling my headphones. My work was sacred again. I wasn't creating a lie or exposing one. I was simply listening for the truth, and patiently, lovingly, helping it find its voice.